Next here on BBC One Northern Ireland, the news with the latest on the review of the exam system in England. Comedy with miserly Victor Meldrew in One Foot in the Grave on BBC Two now. And on BBC Three, it'll fill you with horror. Damien Omen 2 in 10 minutes.
They took my brother. Now they want me.
Do you believe?
How do you know the voices you hear aren't real?
Still think it's all superstition?
Of course.
Exploring the unexplained. Sea of Souls, Monday and Tuesday at 9 on BBC One.
These are stories of survival.
When you see the wee sticky notepad on the checkbook, write no more checks, you know it's for real.
Stories with character.
I'm telling you, don't be laughing at me.
It was actually supposed to be last year's Christmas present.
Stories about parents and about children.
I want to get away from all this.
These are Farm Lives. Starts Wednesday, 18th of February on BBC One.
FA Cup 5th round highlights and match of the day in 20 minutes on BBC One Northern Ireland after the news and sport with Maxine Mawhinney and Hazel Irvine.
Rebels killed 22 in a fierce firefight in Iraq. The gunmen stormed a police station in Fallujah. New look exams, ministers consider diplomas for 14 to 19-year-olds. And Six Nations success as Wales beat Scotland at the Millennium Stadium. Good evening. Dozens of insurgents have launched a deadly daylight assault on an Iraqi police station and security compound. 22 people died, 14 of them Iraqi policemen. The attackers met little resistance as they stormed through the building using rockets and machine guns. The attack took place in Fallujah, west of Baghdad, a centre of resistance to the American-led occupation. Stephen Sacker reports.
Chaos, confusion and sustained gunfire in Fallujah. The town's police station and civil defence base were attacked by several dozen fighters, some firing rocket-propelled grenades. It was a brazen assault in broad daylight. Civilians fled. The Iraqi policemen inside these buildings were ill-prepared and outgunned. Fallujah's hospital filled up with the dead and wounded. Mostly policemen, but several attackers, at least two said to be foreigners, were killed as well. This town has seen plenty of violence since the Americans came here, but nothing quite like this. They started shooting from everywhere, this policeman said. We had no time to fight back. We were just trying to hide. The Iraqi police in this hostile town knew they were vulnerable to attack. They put up defensive barriers, tried to take protective measures, but to no avail. They were simply too exposed. Local people showed me where the fighters had come from, and we found evidence of the rocket-propelled grenades which were fired into the police building as the assault began. Surviving policemen were on edge, but they don't seem in control here, nor do the Americans. We didn't see a single US soldier. And as we left town, a man in the crowd handed us a disturbing tape. It's a recruiting and propaganda video from a militant anti-American group calling itself Ansar al-Sunnah, this supposedly one of their suicide bombers. And this apparently footage of a roadside bomb attack on a US convoy. These sorts of videos are common amongst Islamic militants worldwide. It points to a well-organized group eager to recruit new fighters inside and outside Iraq. Today's Fallujah attack right into the police station also showed a new level of confidence. They shot policemen in their offices, released prisoners from their cells, and sent the Americans a brutal statement of intent.
And Stephen joins me now live from Baghdad. Stephen, what do you think is the significance of today now for the Americans?
Well, I think it's the culmination of a truly wretched week for the Americans, Maxine. The loss of life here and in the last couple of awful attacks we saw, the suicide bomb attacks, were, of course, Iraqi police and Iraqi army recruits. But the fact is that this is a policy from the insurgents which is designed to undermine American policy in Iraq, because the Americans ultimately are looking to withdraw their forces from active duty in the towns and cities of Iraq and rely increasingly on the security powers of those locally hired police and army figures. Now, it is obvious at the moment that they simply don't have the firepower in the Iraqi police in particular to withstand attack from some of the more well-organized insurgents, and that has to be deeply worrying to the Americans, because if there isn't security and stability that can be guaranteed locally, then it is going to be extremely difficult for the Americans to hand over political power, which they say they want to do in the summer. So essentially what you have here is the entire American vision of Iraq's future at stake, and at the moment it looks as though it's in grave danger of running into real trouble.
Stephen, thank you very much indeed. At least 9 people have died and many more are injured after a roof collapsed at a Moscow swimming pool. The weight of heavy snow is believed to have caused the roof to cave in at the leisure centre, which is popular with families. Rescuers are battling tonight to free those trapped under the rubble as temperatures fall. Well, Russian emergency teams have already pulled out more than 60 people from the wreckage. It's feared more than 1,000 people were using the resort's pools and restaurants at the time of the collapse. A radical review of England's secondary school curriculum will recommend a new system of diplomas. Students would also be able to take exams when they are ready, either earlier or later than they do now. Well, here's our education correspondent, Sue Littlemore.
An overload of exams and a confusing mix of academic and vocational qualifications. These are just 2 of the problems supposed to be tackled by this reform of our secondary schools. The proposal suggests introducing a new diploma. The diploma would have 4 levels, tackled between the ages of 14 and 19. Both academic and vocational studies, including GCSEs and A-levels, will count, but extracurricular activities would also be recognised. The former Chief Inspector for Schools, Mike Tomlinson, is the architect of the plans. He wants to scrap the idea of taking certain exams at a certain age.
For our most able students, we can offer them real challenge, and they can take that challenge and move ahead quickly. For other students who need a little more time to learn, they too will have that opportunity, rather than being told at them, as they are at the moment at a particular age, that they failed.
Many teachers will welcome the proposals, especially if they put vocational qualifications on a par with academic studies. But it's just as important that employers and universities support them too.
The critical question for me is whether universities, and particularly the selecting universities at the top end of the market, will accept the diploma.
A-levels and GCSEs are not about to disappear. Although they'll lose their status as standalone qualifications, they'll become part of the diploma, which anyway would be phased in over 10 years. The idea that students take their exams when they're ready rather than at a fixed age will be hugely attractive to ministers. They're concerned that too many youngsters drop out of education at 16, and this idea, they hope, might persuade them to stay on. Sue Littlemore, BBC News at the Department for Education.
The co-chairman of the Conservative Party has said it is a chronic injustice for those living below the poverty line to pay income tax. Lord Saatchi made his comments in a Guardian interview, marking Michael Howard's first 100 days as Tory leader. Party sources said his remarks were personal and didn't reflect official policy. The police in Lancashire say they are desperate to hear from one of their detectives who's gone missing. Tony Hall was last seen yesterday evening in the Ribchester area. Officers believe he is suffering from depression, and they're growing increasingly concerned for his welfare. The aid agencies are warning of a crisis unfolding in Haiti as the violent uprising against President Aristide intensifies. More than 50 people have been killed in clashes between rebels and the government in the last fortnight. The current unrest in Haiti started last month with street protests against President Aristide. The rebels have taken control of Gonaïves, a key city in the north. From there, Claire Marshall sent this report.
Leading a triumphant march through their newly won territory. Bouta Meteya strides the streets of his domain, flanked by his resistance front rebel army. The town of Gonaïves is fully under their control. Many of these men were once members of the Cannibal Army, a militia group which was loyal to President Aristide. Now they have turned against him. This shack in a slum of Gonaïves is their headquarters. Fortified by rum, the de facto ruler of the town told us his strategy.
Aristide give me some gun to fighting with the convergence. So now the gun Aristide was I'm fight with him now.
This town, already poor, has been ravaged by the battle for domination here. This is part of the rebels' defence strategy. This is the main road into Gonaïves. Down there are 3 barricades, and here the rebels have put a bus to try to prevent any government forces from entering. Despite the disorder, many people here say that they feel safer with their new rulers.
With the government, everything's expensive and hard for us. Now, even though there is nothing in the market, things are better for us here.
The international community is reluctant to intervene. Haiti seems to have no immediate way out of a very violent future. Claire Marshall, BBC News, Gonaïves, Haiti.
Images of diseased organs could soon be displayed on cigarette packets. The Department of Health is considering the idea to try to shock people into giving up. But pro-smoking groups say the idea is gratuitously offensive.
Despite the health warnings, 13 million people still smoke in the UK. The government is worried the anti-smoking message isn't getting through. Now it's considering using graphic images on cigarette packets to shock them into quitting. And these are the type of images which could be used: rotting teeth and diseased organs. In Canada, they're believed to have been effective in encouraging people to try to give up.
It'll just make people pause for a moment, and whenever they buy a packet of cigarettes, these images will be with them. So every time they put a cigarette to their mouth, these images will be reminding them what they're doing.
The government says it will consult on whether to press ahead with the plans once the European Commission has compiled a database of images to be used.
There are, of course, all sorts of ways for people to avoid the anti-smoking message. These stickers, for example, aim to cover any uncomfortable health warning with something a little more entertaining.
And some psychologists believe shock tactics don't work.
Most smokers will know that the little box on the cigarette pack says something about it's bad for your health, but they don't bother to read the information because they just don't want to face it.
Because every cigarette we smoke makes this fatty stuff get stuck in our arteries.
The British Heart Foundation, however, is convinced tough messages do work. Its latest campaign using explicit images attracted their biggest ever response from smokers looking to quit. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Now, with news of the rugby and the rest of today's sport, here's Hazel Irvin. Hazel.
Thanks, Maxine. Good evening to you. Now, they say that good things come to those who wait, and that's certainly true of the Welsh Rugby Union side. After 7 long years, they've won their opening match in the Six Nations Championship, and they did it in some style, beating a new-look Scotland side by 23 points to 10 in Cardiff.
Start the way you left off. That was the expectation in Wales after the team's impressive World Cup displays. Expectations that were met after only 3 minutes, as a fluid passing move ended with Rhys Williams sliding in to score his and Wales' opening try. There was a reminder from Scotland's new captain that Johnny Wilkinson isn't the only number 10 with an eye for a drop goal. But Chris Patterson's team was no match for the newfound Welsh confidence. Adam Jones and his unmistakable mop of hair rounding off another impressive sequence of passes. For Scotland's new coach, Matt Williams, it was a painful initiation to Six Nations rugby as he watched Rhys Williams add a third try for the Welsh. They could have had several more. For the new look Scotland, this was a disappointing start, and they've now got to face the new world champions England next week. For Wales, an encouraging continuation of their World Cup form and a great start to their Six Nations campaign. After last year's whitewash, excessive Welsh jubilation is probably justified, but there are tougher and more imaginative teams than Scotland still to play. Gura Davis, BBC News, Cardiff.
Earlier in the afternoon, France powered past Ireland 35-17 in Paris. The Irish were still well in touch early in the second half, but France then produced a devastating run of points, touching down 4 tries in all. This is the last of them from Jean-Baptiste Elizalde. Now in the FA Cup, an ill-tempered derby saw Manchester United beat their city neighbours 4-2 and book a place in the quarter-finals. But United had to play much of the match with 10 men when Gary Neville was sent off after this incident with Steve McManaman. Meanwhile, in tonight's tie at the Stadium of Light, First Division Sunderland earned a replay with Premiership side Birmingham City after a 1-1 draw.
31 years ago, Jim Montgomery's heroics in goal for Sunderland helped them beat the mighty Leeds in the FA Cup final. Bob Stokoe, the manager then, died earlier this month. Players and fans paid tribute. The Stadium of Light was only half full, but then only half the match was worth watching. Mikel Forsell's goal for Birmingham oozed class. Kevin Kyle's equaliser, a glancing header, wasn't bad either. But the second half never quite reached the same heights. Stephen Wright was close to a winner, but Birmingham was saved by the bar. Nothing could save their substitute, Aliou Cisse. He came on for the last 10 minutes, was booked twice, and was first back down the tunnel. The rest weren't too far behind. They'll meet again in 11 days' time to settle the tie. Ollie Foster, BBC News.
And in today's other fifth-round ties, it was goalless at Loftus Road between Fulham and West Ham. Division 1 Millwall made it through against Burnley, and Second Division Tranmere Rovers also booked a quarter-final spot, overcoming Swansea 2-1. And of course, there's action from all of today's games on Match of the Day following this programme. In Scotland, Celtic seemed to be within sight of the SPL title after moving 13 points clear at the top of the table. But the Parkhead side had to fight back in their game against Dundee United. Sean Maloney got their equaliser and Celtic went on to win the game 2-1. Meanwhile, Rangers lost ground on their rivals after only scraping a draw at Aberdeen. Frank de Boer rescued a point for his team with an equaliser 3 minutes from the end. Elsewhere, fourth-placed Dunfermline beat Dundee, bottom side Partick Thistle lost 2-1 at Kilmarnock, and financially troubled Livingston gave their supporters 3 reasons to be cheerful in their win over Motherwell. The hosts Tunisia have won the African Cup of Nations for the very first time. They beat North African rivals Morocco 2-1 in today's final. Striker Ziad Jaziri was gifted the decisive goal early in the second half. Some sad news tonight. Within the past few minutes, it's been reported that Italy's most popular cyclist, the former Tour de France winner Marco Pantani, has been found dead in Rimini. He was 34. And don't forget, there's much more sport to come from BBC Sport tomorrow with live FA Cup coverage of Arsenal versus Chelsea. Then it's Italy against England in the Six Nations. A very good excuse for an afternoon in your armchair, I think. Maxine.
Hazel, thank you. The main news tonight. 22 people have died in a massive attack by insurgents on a police station in the Iraqi town of Fallujah. Well, that's the latest. Don't forget news throughout the night over on BBC News 24. From all of us, good night.
Good evening. The fog has started to thicken up across Northern Ireland, and that problem will be with us until tomorrow. Not just for Northern Ireland either, but for parts of Scotland and Wales. To be honest, just about anywhere could see some rather poor visibility through the night and tomorrow morning. Could be a bit icy as well, particularly in the north and the west. One thing I'm glad to say, however, is the rain that we've seen, the persistent rain in the northeast today of England, Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, half an inch of rain in Bridlington, is now just about starting to fizzle out as it slips its way southwards. And it will push south across the rest of England and parts of Wales through the night, holding the temperatures up for the most part, but the cloud fairly unreliable. So if it does break, perhaps in East Anglia, in the west as well, it'll turn a little bit foggy, as I mentioned, but potentially frosty as well. The frost, the main risk in the west, really, Northern Ireland and Scotland. But for most of us, it is looking drier and brighter tomorrow, and noticeably so for Lincolnshire and Yorkshire. It may be a little damp to start and grey, but the skies will brighten up. And almost a repeat performance for Scotland and Northern Ireland. The fog a little reluctant to clear once again, but we should see some sunshine coming out here, the western side of England and Wales. Mind you, the south of England, the Channel Islands in particular, could start rather wet tomorrow morning, some heavier bursts of rain. But on the whole, the cloud will tend to lift and thin, and most of us should have a much brighter and drier afternoon, with temperatures very similar to those of today. Now, the main change as we head into Monday is that more cloud will come into the west of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's the main change. For most of us, it stays largely dry, but largely cloudy. Good evening.
Not bad for a day's work.
If you're rich, greedy, a taker, there's always someone waiting to take it from you.
This is Albert. He'll show you the bait, and once you're hooked, he'll reel you in. And Stacy, sexy, seductive, and sharp enough to bleed you dry. Ashley Morgan, he'll get you anything you want, but never what you expected. This is Danny. One day he'll be the best, if he could just learn that it's not all about the money.
Hustle, the con is on. Tuesday the 24th of February, BBC One.
Now on BBC One Northern Ireland, tonight's lottery results. In the main lotto draw, the winning numbers are 14, 15, 17, 31, 39 and 45, and the bonus is 23. It looks like there are just 2 lucky jackpot winners, both winning £8.5 million. The lotto extra numbers are 1, 2, 5, 33, 41 and 49. No winning tickets here, so the jackpot for the next draw is an estimated £1.9 million. In the daily play draw, which was witnessed by an independent auditor, the 7 winning numbers were 9, 10, 12, 15, 17, 20 and 27. One lucky jackpot collects £30,000. And finally, the Thunderball numbers 10, 16, 21, 26 and 29. And the Thunderball itself is 5.
What do you do if you've neighbours from hell? Who do you turn to for help?
We've suffered verbal abuse, death threats, attacks with implements, claw hammers. Our windows have been smashed 6 times.
That's nonsense. That's absolutely fabulous.
Well, that's all nonsense. That's nonsense. Yes.
The housing executive were unwilling to deal with it, felt unable to deal with it, and wanted it just to go away.
Spotlight, Tuesday, 10:35, BBC One.
The tongue from my lips to God's ears, F.A. Cup.
The future looks bleak in tonight's thriller No Escape at 11:35 on BBC One Northern Ireland.